Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. The Harriers, written by Doth Hath Depression. It was only a few days since the Vulcan had ravaged his fortress, and the life in the human encampment turned out to be quite enjoyable. As unusual as they were. Wake up when the humans commanded it, put on the prisoners' clothes that they supplied, which had to be modified to account for the face wings. Eat the strange yet palatable food they give you. Toasted bread with pulp fruit and a bowl of what seemed like mashed oats and milk. Whatever it was savory sweet and filling. And that's all that mattered. Then moved into the camp under the watchful eye of the guard and shunned boxes of pointed metal cylinders and containers of strange liquid. Oh, and watched the humans' creations in action. Whenever the Fae were given time to rest, a lot gathered around where the humans' flying machines would rise into the air and soar into the distance with a howl that vibrated through their chests. They'd seen the Vulcan being prepared for war, with humans disappear into its belly, followed by egg-shaped metal balls that hung from the guts of the beast. Were these what caused so much destruction? He didn't know enough English to ask. There were also smaller, pointier machines. These, he guessed, filled their equivalent of the role of the Virem. They were sleek. They didn't make such a terrifying noise as the Vulcan, yet were still just as imposing. And in order to fly, had to run across the field in the same fashion. All except one. This one, called the Harrier, could rise into the air like a bird, yet its wings didn't flap. Instead, it pushed hot air into the ground beneath it. It hovered like a fly, before shooting forward like an arrow. Of course, there were other machines that acted like this, ones that spanned blades around their heads and looked strangely similar to insects. But the Harrier seemed special, so we regarded it fondly. The day followed through with 2 more meals and plenty of work. Watch the humans march in unison, arms swinging, rods resting on the shoulders. A terrifying sight to anyone who knew what power they possessed. Then it was back into the hut to sleep and then repeat everything the next day. Except he wasn't woken by the knocking of the door and the shout of a human. He was woken by many shouts and the roar of a dragon. This was why the generals hadn't ordered any dragons into battle. They were stockpiling them for an attack of the humans. There must have been over 180 Virems and maybe 15 king dragons, as well as numerous lesser species. Below the humans were all rushing into action, ground-mounted rods erupting in puffs of smoke and others spitting fire at rapid pace. As the prisoners rushed out to the hut seeking shelter, they watched as the human flying machines roared to life, each one filing onto the stone strip, except for the Harriers. As soon as their riders climbed on and into them, they crawled to an adjacent space and rose into the air, darting forwards into the legions of dragons. And they danced in the air. As they met in the sky, they bobbed and weaved like birds of prey, erupting lightning from their fronts that struck the Virems down, crumpling as if they were made of parchment. For the king dragons, however, it seemed like even the humans were unable to penetrate their hide. That thought was quickly dispelled, however. Then a white plume of cloud appeared to spring from the Harrier, and an object smashed straight into the side of the king dragon, erupting in a brilliant flame and ending its life swiftly. Throughout this, the Fae started to have conflicting thoughts and feelings. Do they pray for the humans? They had treated them with respect and honor even though they were enemies. But shouldn't they have their minds set on the victory of the Fae? This was their kingdom. The humans were invaders. It was too much to think about. So they simply settled down and watched. The battle raged on, the legions of Fae held back by the crushing power of the human war machines, with crawling steel beasts eradicating all that were on the opposing end of their rods. and the bug-like ones spreading fire and lightning across the rows of shields and spears, magic crackling in the distance, merely bouncing off the steel bodies. It was hopeless. Soon all the human flying machines were in the air, and the dragons started to fall in triplicate, completely eradicating any resistance, only to turn upon the armies of the Fae. There was no winning this battle. He had made up his mind. There is no point trying to oppose such a devastating force if it's already won. The humans were his new masters now, and there was no going back. End of story. Story number 2. Irresistible, written by Deomek. Until the human representative set foot on the capital, the whole galaxy was clueless. It made sense in hindsight. Human technology was rather primitive compared to the galactic standard. Their systems weren't compatible with the others and wouldn't be for several years. And since the humans, obviously, didn't speak galactic norm, every piece of correspondence had to be translated. For convenience sake, the Galactic Council and Earth government stuck to text-based communication. In the meantime, the humans worked hard on updating their systems, and the galactic tech started integrating human language into the intergalactic neural net, which allowed for instantaneous communications. 6 years after initial contact for the humans, they were invited to the capital to begin the application process for new species. It did not go as expected. Ambassador, diplomat, whatever her title was, Maria Abana waited patiently for her escort. "Welcome," said a robotic, clearly artificial voice. A slug-looking alien slithered towards her. Maria's personal AI helpfully informed her that the slug was known as Representative 398470. The species, who were known as the 99,999, used numbers instead of true names. They were also blind, deaf, and mute. Among their own, they communicated mainly through telepathy. "Thank you, Representative," she replied in galactic norm. Her relative fluency in the lingua franca of the galaxy was another reason that the government had selected her to represent humanity. Yes, follow me." 3984 slid away, and Maria followed. As they passed others in the hall, Maria made sure to smile, nod, and say hello. It wouldn't hurt to be polite. For some reason, that seemed to be, putting it simply, freak the other aliens out. Her greetings caused a tentacle squid to drop his tablet, a green humanoid to run into a wall, and a bunny dog hybrid to jump 5 feet into the air. "Googs," she hissed at her AI. "Am I breaching any protocols or traditions?" "None that I know of," whispered the AI in her ear. "Your standard greeting should be inoffensive to a majority of species." Maria frowned, but decided to ignore it. They had arrived in the main hall, and she had bigger things to worry about. She smiled and murmured a thank you to the intimidating guards who opened the door for her. The hulking crab giants immediately slumped to the ground. She blinked in confusion, but before she could do anything, the doors automatically closed behind her. "To the platform," reminded the AI. Representative 3984 had finished the introductions, and now it was her turn to speak for humanity. Members from 1,000 alien species watched and waited as she climbed up the long stairs. Maria plastered a polite grin as she stood in front of the ruling chamber for the galactic government. "Don't screw this up," she thought. "Greetings, representatives. I stand before you to convey the thanks of..." The reaction was instantaneous. Some screeched, some flew into the air, and countless others fainted. The SDO's eyes, I literally fell out of the eye socket. Only a few species were unaffected. Humanity?" Maria trailed off as the pandemonium before her. She'd given plenty of speeches before, but never had gotten that reaction. "What do I do?" Googs was silent for a few seconds. "I do not know the answer." Thankfully for Maria, their reaction was technically not her fault. It turned out that humans had irresistible voices when compared to the rest of alien species. Immediately, the demand for human voice recordings and music skyrocketed exponentially. From then on, other aliens had to communicate with humans through mediums like the internet or hire deaf middlemen to do it for them. Humans could involuntarily hypnotize many aliens with just their voice. It made negotiations for non-humans troublesome, to say the least. Pirated recordings of humans immediately became part of the black market, and the governments of the more sensitive species labeled them as Class 7 drugs. Unsurprisingly, Morgan Freeman was classified as a weapon of mass destruction. His voice started several religions and became the preferred method of unaliving amongst many species. Dying from pure orgasmic happiness was certainly much better than the alternatives. End of story. The algorithm reckons you should be watching this video next, and I recommend that you should be always watching my video. So, click with energy! And yes, clicking that does help the channel. Thank you very much. I would just quickly like to give thanks to our Tier 5 members: Elithia, Barky, Feudicuel, Meridian 117, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Albarden Gusta, Savage Patch Papa, and Lord Azrakal.